You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back. Today in the studio, we've got Carrie Panchuk, and she's from Housing Wire. Great publication for our industry, and got some information for us today. We try to talk most about North Texas, but I'd like to do a little comparison about, how are we shaping up against the national numbers right now in real estate? What's really going on out there from a reporting standpoint?
Sure. From a reporting standpoint, you really have to separate North Texas from the national numbers. What happened with the real estate bubble that crashed in 2008, you saw really a bifurcated recovery from that. Texas was not a hardest hit market, neither was North Texas. Your hardest hit markets were areas like California and Florida. So there are states, New Jersey, New York, there are states that are still dealing with either long judicial foreclosure timelines, having a difficult time getting those distressed assets back into the market. That's creating a recovery for them that doesn't look much like a recovery, whereas in North Texas, you're not dealing with that same pipeline. You're actually dealing with an inventory shortage now. So in Texas, you're starting to see prices go up. You're starting to see multiple bidders for properties. You also see that in California, which was hardest hit, but of course California operates from its own dynamics. It was high in the bubble. Prices crashed. It hit its bottom probably roughly in 2012 based on research that we've covered. And then they started to come back. But essentially, you can't look at national numbers and always know what's going on at the local level. One thing that's happening, let's talk about the distressed pipeline. Let's talk about what's happening on the distressed side before we move to the traditional real estate market. Lender Processing Services, which is a mortgage analytics company that goes and researches data on mortgages that they have access to, basically reported this past week that the number of homeowners in some stage of foreclosure fell 25% in the past year. That was considered a nice mark for anyone following real estate because, okay, we still have a pipeline of roughly 4.7 million homeowners still in delinquency or foreclosure, which is down from 5 million a year ago. So there's still a distressed pipeline. But the fact that the number of homeowners in some stage of foreclosure is down 25% in the past year at least says we're working through some of it. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, certainly the coverage shows that loan modifications, an extra focus on servicing, an extra focus on using short sales to get through some of the solutions for homeowners who might have been upside down or distressed.
And some of the low interest rates and some of the loan programs that were out there that were offered, like the HARP program and things like that, have really helped people that maybe it got tight for them. Maybe they've had a reduction in income, but their lower interest rates have been able to bring their housing costs down enough to where they're still okay. They're not losing their homes, and that's been a great thing.
It's been a great thing. And rising prices also helps regain equity. Let's say you're underwater, but you're in a market where you start to see prices edge up. In North Texas, they've edged up a bit. I think California has seen strong surges in home prices. As those prices go up, if you're still in the home, now you're gaining back some of that equity if you were underwater. That can be a helpful lift for those homeowners that were on that line and feeling like they might fall off. So that has helped sort of restore some equilibrium to the market. Whether we're there yet, you and I were talking about this earlier. There's a debate there. Are we fully out of this, or is there some hidden pipeline or sellers maybe not on the market that might come in and rush certain markets with more product? And I don't know if we can make that clarification yet, but I would say that we're seeing a shift. And if you want to look at just North Texas, the bidding in North Texas, if you want ideal North Texas, let's say North Dallas suburbs real estate, what we hear from not only realtors, but what we hear from buyers and sellers and analysts is that the Texas market is being looked towards as one of the healthier markets in the U.S. And it's actually a seller's market. If you have an ideal piece of property in an area where people want to live, you will probably find multiple bids on that particular property. And when we pipe in Megan later on, she has some anecdotal personal experience to show on how difficult it can actually be now if you're on the buyer side to get into this market, because this is one of the more stabilized markets where home selling and buying is now at a nice positive momentum, at least compared to where we were a few years ago.
And the funny part about that, too, is, we're doing pre-qualifications and pre-approvals for people at our office all the time. And, with the stock market going up like it has recently, we've seen interest rates go up as well, as much as half a point in interest rate. And I was talking to a client last week, and she's doing a USDA loan, and originally we had quoted like 3.25 rate. And when we went to lock, this week, it was like 3.75, and the market has really moved that much. And she said, well, what if I waited another week? And I always say, I don't have a crystal ball. And it's kind of like when you're floating your rate, I always say, you go to Vegas. I'm not going to Vegas.
Right.
You choose. It's just like buying stock. I mean, you never know what our interest rates can change hourly. Mm-hmm. And that's the crazy part about the business, is that, when you sit down and think about it, when you're trying to figure out what you can afford for a home, when I pre-qualify people, I tend to pre-qualify them for a half point higher. I tell them, here's the rate today, but in this market today, I think you have to be able to afford something a little higher. So while you're searching for a home, you can't lock a rate in. So, and once you get ready to find a house, and then if I've already qualified you for a half point higher, I'm pretty safe, because I don't think rates are going to jump half point again, at least I hope not, in the next 30 days.
Well, another factor that factors into interest rates that we follow at Housing Wire, and most financial publications look to the Fed to see how much of the mortgage-backed securities market they're acquiring. As long as the Fed is acquiring mortgage-backed securities, that also is a Federal Reserve mechanism for keeping interest rates low. We just had the FOMC meetings come out from the Federal Reserve Committee this past week, and they voted to commit to continue to basically buy mortgage-backed securities, which does potentially have the effect to keep interest rates lower. However, you do see members of the Fed at times come out and say, at some point, as things improve, we have to stop. As employment, because they're also trying to foster an employment recovery at the Federal Reserve, as that stabilizes a bit, at some point they're going to want to not buy as many MBS securities. We're not there at that point yet. I mean, they basically voted that the Fed's going to continue buying MBS, so mortgage-backed securities.
I think an article I read, Bernanke was saying that employment number was somewhere around 6.8% unemployment. If we get to that point, then they'll really pull back on buying bonds.
Absolutely. And, a year ago, people were saying that could last through 2014, the Fed's, quote, what they call quantitative easing. We don't know at this point, because as a recovery sort of starts to, shift into being, there's a dispute on when are they going to pull back. We've heard estimates of some are saying, okay, if it's okay by June, maybe they'll start to make a change in their philosophy at the Fed. But some of that's up in the air as well when you talk about how hard it is to predict mortgage interest rates and what rate you're going to be able to get in at during a certain week.
Yeah, and it's a dicey game. I don't really see a rapid jump, but it's for a guy 54 years old, and when I'm talking to a client and they're saying that they think that 4% interest rates are high, when my first home was at 12% in 1982, it's you can afford a different level of house today than you could back then, and I think that's helped housing. It's helped builders. It's helped the economy grow. And what scares me a little bit about all the things I'm hearing is everybody keeps thinking, okay, what if something happens and we get into hyperinflation or something like that? How's that really going to work for us? So if you're listening out there and you're ready to buy a house and you really are thinking about either refinancing, if your home loan, if you've not refinanced yet, you need to refinance now. With my whole heart, you need to get it done. It's drying up right now. Rates are going back up. We've already, I think, hit kind of the low. And so if you're listening, you have not refinanced yet, pull out your cell phone, put in this number, 817-925-2546. That's 817-925-2546. And just type in the word buy, sell, or refinance, and we'll get a hold of you, and we'll take good care of you here at Affiliated Bank, and I'll personally take care of you. So I wanted to throw that out there because it was a little scary the last few weeks when rates, since April 30th, rates have jumped up near a half a point, and in a lot of cases half a point in interest rates. And I think a lot of people were surprised because I think we kind of fly blind a little bit. We just kind of think, oh, well, this rates this today. It's always going to be that rate. But I've been in this business a long time, and I have seen things change, and they did change in the last few weeks. I'm hoping it'll come back a little bit, but I'm not real confident in that at this point.
And you had mentioned in our discussion earlier, refis dropped here in the past week, the refi share of mortgage applications, and people have been waiting for a while to see a refi burnout. Certainly there was a refis in the past few years have made up a larger portion of some of the mortgage application activity, whereas if you go back and you look at peak times, before we had the housing crash, if you look at mid-2000s decade, you were seeing more purchase apps, probably not as many refis. Refinancing your mortgage became sort of the trend. But when you start to see fewer refi applications, and of course, you're right, it changes week to week. So you can't always predict where it's going to go. But if you start to see a refi burnout, you're right, we may be sort of moving towards a change there.
Well, stay tuned. After the break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit more with Carrie Panchuk from Housing Wire. And we're also going to have a special guest right after the break. You're going to listen to this. It's how the millennial group are now shopping for homes and how they're really getting their information. And we're going to have a special guest call in, and she's going to talk about basically how she went through the process, right, Carrie?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so stay tuned. You're listening to Real Talk Texas here on KLIF, AM 570, News and Information.